Can humor help you sell more homes? Today's guest thinks that if you can find the funny, you can find the money. Andrew Tarvin is actually the world's first humor engineer. He actually teaches people how to get better results for their business by having more fun. And what's interesting is he's actually worked with some of the largest brands and companies on the planet that are actually not really known for being funny. He's actually worked with Microsoft. I mean, about the funniest thing they did was the little clip guy, you know, the little Clippy. You guys remember him? And then he's also worked with the FBI, which right now I can't think of a whole lot of funny stuff that they've been putting out. So when you are working with brands and trying to help them make more money by adding humor, it's not as easy as you think. And that's part of the reason that Andrew's TED Talk has over 4 million views. He has a TEDx talk on the power of humor that has over 4 million views. So props on that, Andrew. I think my most views is like 150,000 views. So you're dominating there. He is the author of Humor That Works. He also loves the color orange and chocolate. Drew, welcome to the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Glad you're here. Now, listen, I'm going to be really honest with you, Drew. When most real estate agents use humor, it's actually not on purpose. Like, there are websites dedicated to like cheesy, terrible real estate headshots. There are literally blogs about awful listing photos. Even Ellen has a recurring segment on her show about terrible listing descriptions. Unfortunately, more people seem to be laughing at our industry than laughing with our industry. But my first question is very simple. If I do not consider myself funny, and if I do not have kind of a funny bone and I'm not humorous, should I just change the channel right now?
Absolutely not. I would say that humor is a skill, which means it can be learned. And that's kind of the premise of the TEDx talk. And I think, like you said, part of the reason why it's been successful is so many people have this belief that humor is something that you're born able to do. And for me, I've done over 1,000 shows as a stand-up comedian, improviser, storyteller, spoken word artist. I've spoken and performed in all 50 states, 25 countries, one planet, this one. But I recently went to my high school reunion. People found out that I did comedy and they're like, but you're not funny. And that's because growing up, I was never the life of the party or the class clown. My senior superlative, I was voted teacher's pet. I'm always been much more of an introvert. So it's something that can be learned. I started learning it in university and then kind of since then, over the past 15 years. And that's really a big part of our program is how do we teach people this skill of humor? What are the things that you can intentionally do to build humor? And even with that said, if there are people like, nope, tried it, still not good. The other thing to recognize is that to effectively use humor in our work, we don't even always have to be the creator of humor. We can be the shepherd of humor. We can share kind of humor out. So I'd say if you don't think that you're funny, one, listen because you're going to learn some tips on how to be funnier. And then two, we're also going to talk about some tips on how you can leverage humor that already exists to get better results.
Sure. So the next question is simple. What is the upside of even trying? If I were to get it right, what does it do for my business?
That's a great question. And there are over 30 benefits to using humor in the workplace, ranging from one, as a communication tool of getting people to pay attention, of helping people understand things, of people remembering things a little bit longer, to your own personal things like increasing productivity and reducing stress, to something as simple as burning calories. 10 to 15 minutes of laughter burns as many calories as 5 minutes of aerobic exercise, 10 minutes of dancing, and 15 minutes of milking a cow. So if your listeners like milking cows for exercise, they can stop and just laugh instead.
Yeah, that would be what we call, my son would say weird flex, but okay. Now, you said something that I think is really critical to our industry. Like in real estate, Andrew, they want to be TOMA, which is top of mind awareness. Like for a real estate agent to be insanely successful, they have to be the person that their network thinks of when they think of doing a deal. And what I thought was fascinating is there's this case study. I'd love you to expand on it a little bit. About how when somebody laughs, it actually releases endorphins in their brain. And when it does that, it like locks the memory in better. Can you explain that better than I just did?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a physiological process that happens when we laugh. Like you said, it releases various chemicals in our brain, endorphins being one of the big ones. In terms of endorphins, is anytime we feel something positive, whether that's us eating chocolate or something physically stimulating that we like, endorphins are released. Laughter has that same release. Laughter also helps to release serotonin, which can help to improve focus. So there's kind of a dual benefit to the physiological benefits of laughter. The other thing that's interesting is that as people, as humans, we tend to associate those positive feelings with whatever caused us to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not necessarily related to that person, but like a person making us laugh or bringing us joy, we're like, oh, I want to spend more time with that person. And it
Sure.
kind of comes down to humor in general, kind of boils down to a very dumb question.
Mm-hmm.
And the dumb question is, would you rather do something that is fun or not fun?
Mm-hmm. And so even though a real estate transaction may be very serious,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, if I'm sitting at home thinking about if I want to call Sally or not,
Mhm.
the fact that she's sort of laid back, if you will, or funny, or she's jovial
Mhm.
is going to just quite simply make me like less hesitant to hit dial.
Yeah,
Right.
you're gonna be
Yeah.
more willing to hop on the phone because I
Mhm.
mean, imagine a scenario where you are hiring someone, whether it's an assistant or someone that you're working with or another realtor or whatever, and you had one person who had good qualifications, they kind of knew what they're talking about, and they were enjoyed to be around. You got along with them well, and you had another person who was about as entertaining as a brick wall.
Mhm.
Right? Which one are you going to go with? And that's why you see people who use humor in the workplace are given more opportunities for that exact reason of like, oh, well, this person is good at what they do, and also it's an enjoyable experience. We spend
Sure.
far too much time at work not to enjoy those interactions. And so anytime we have that like slightly elevated thing, that's the other thing is that humor in the workplace, it's not the equivalent of, oh, you have to be as funny as Chris Rock or Ellen DeGeneres to get a Netflix comedy special. Work is so boring as it is that
Mhm.
anything that you do that's a slight improvement, people then like constantly like, oh my God, yes, I need this. And so the bar doesn't have to be nearly as high for engaging humor, really.
Yeah. So we're going to go through some examples here, Drew, of
Mhm.
people really getting it right, and by getting it right, making more money.
Mhm.
And we're going to talk about the right ways to use humor
Mhm.
in a business and the different departments. And but I'm curious because like we have a social media team that's really talented, and as much as we know what we are going to post, we have a never post list,
Mhm.
meaning like we do not touch politics, we do not touch religion. There's just stuff that we will never post about. So I'm curious, like, do you have a never be funny about list? Like, before we get into the good advice about being funny, is there actually like a list, or do you have any disclaimers about when you should never use humor? Like, are there scenarios where it's actually totally unacceptable?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if we were talking at a theoretical level about humor or comedy in general, I'd say there is no topic that can't be talked about.
If I'm firing someone, should I be funny while I do it?
No, not absolutely not. So, like from a theoretical standpoint on comedy, there's going to be all types of topics. If it's a comedy stage or something like that, when it comes
Mhm.
to effective humor in the workplace, there's kind of three reasons why humor becomes inappropriate. The first reason is that it's an inappropriate topic,
Mhm.
right? So,
Mhm.
using humor is not an excuse, like you talked about, to then talk about religion or sex or drugs or rock and roll, kind of as a joke. But the topic is still very, very important. You can't be like, oh, but it was just a joke, right? That doesn't save you from anything. So there are certain topics that you want to avoid. The
Sure.
second reason why it can be inappropriate is that it has an inappropriate target. And
Mhm.
so some humor is more broad and affiliative and kind of positive inclusive. That's like Ellen DeGeneres. Some humor is a little bit more aggressive, where you're going after a specific target, or maybe you are like making fun of a competitor, which then is going to kind of set the wrong mentality for
Mhm. So
people.
the
So
so the topic, the target, what's the third one?
and the third one is timing. And exactly to your point, right? If you're going to fire someone, that's not the time to bust out,
Yeah.
your Frozen parody of like, gotta let you
Sure.
go, not
Yeah.
gonna pay you back anymore, right? That's
Right.
not an appropriate time to use it. And what with humor, it's not to say everything that you do has to be humorous. It's about
Mhm.
saying this is another tool that we have in our tool belt that we can use with intention to get
Yeah.
specific results.
Sure. So there is a, everybody says too soon. So yes, there are things that it's too soon to joke about. And I just personally also think, any type of tragedies, like you said, that's a topic you wouldn't touch. I love that approach, because I do think some people, and we're going to show a video in a minute of, a brand that really got in a lot of trouble for trying to be funny. They just absolutely missed the mark. Let me ask you a different question.
Sure.
No matter what you do, you're always in the customer service business.
Right.
And what we've learned at Curaytor, and what I know all of our clients and fans that are watching know, is that customer service, the definition of that is somebody's pissed off. So have you ever figured out a way to like kind of appropriately use humor in the customer service role, where by nature they're literally fielding calls where people are not real happy to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what's interesting is that for some brands, so we do some work with, Microsoft and IBM, and I was just recently at a Microsoft event, and one of the speakers there was saying that customer service is their first touch point with a customer, because most of the time they're selling their products through, Amazon or through a computer store or something like that. So the first time that they actually interact with Microsoft as a company itself is in customer service, right? So it's incredibly important touch point with people. And that goes back to like, what is the relationship with that person? When you're first calling up, how is that person sounding on the phone? Or does it sound like they hate their job and that they hate being there and that they're annoyed that you absolutely like used the customer service line and called? Or are they a little bit more upbeat? Is there a smile almost coming through with their voice? And are they empathetic? And I think with customer service, when people are a little bit kind of upset, you start first with empathy as a way to start to develop a relationship, and then slowly start to bring in a little bit humor. And you can bring in that humor by reacting to the type of things that they're having challenges with. If they're very annoyed about something, you can kind of agree with them and kind of relate that to another annoyance that you have.
Sure.
Commiserate with them.
Yeah. So let's say, using the Microsoft example, Internet Explorer sucks and is broken. No, I mean, I know you worked with them. I don't want to get you in trouble. But like, if I called in and I said that, and then the customer service, you're right. If the tone, which is the only thing you hear on the phone, has empathy, that's the sort of path towards the humor then maybe being okay later in the call. So like, as an example, if I was a customer service rep at Microsoft and they were complaining about Internet Explorer, I might, after I've kind of, gotten them to calm down a bit, I might say something like, I'm not going to lie, I actually threw my last Surface out the window for the same reason. So that would be sort of relatability, like being a human and saying, hey, I know how frustrating that is. I wanted to smash mine too.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you, you can kind of make that connection with them of like, oh, I understand it's frustrating when, Internet Explorer is not working, because you're like, you need the internet. And, it's kind of like you might go to a slight relation of like, it used to be that it was okay if it took 7 minutes for a website to load when we were back on dial up. But now I'm exactly like you. Like if a web page doesn't load within 2 seconds, I'm like, you don't even deserve my view. So I understand that it's frustrating. So let's go through a couple of steps to understand how we can help you out.
Right? Yeah, versus like, oh, you're using Internet Explorer or you're using AOL as well. You're so old school. That would be like terrible compared to the way you just did it. Cool. I'm in sales, Drew. Okay. I love sales. And I have personally found that bringing humor in the right way in the sales process is almost a must-have department to use it in. So I'm going to give you an example of where humor has been helpful for our customers. And I want you to kind of talk through if I did a good job or bad job. I'm just going to role play a scenario that happens for real estate agents. So the phone rings, they pick up, hey, this is Chris from Remax. How's it going? And the person says, hey, my name's John. I'm actually found a home for sale on Zillow. I was wondering if it's still for sale. That's what I wanted to know if it's still listed. I wanted to know if it's still available. And so in sales, what we teach is acknowledge what they said, kind of respond to what they said, and then pivot to what you want to say. Because if we just say, no, it's not available, they're going to be like, all right, thank you, bye. Right? Or if we say, yes, it's available, they're like, cool, I'll call my agent to go see it, bye. And our goal is to have a conversation. Right. So one of the techniques that we'll use is we'll acknowledge what they said. Oh, you want to know if the home's still for sale on Zillow? Great question. I'll pull that up for you right now. I have access to the MLS, so we'll find out for sure.
Mhm.
And then but then the kind of ARP would be, now I will be honest, if you did find it on Zillow, there's a chance that it might have sold more than a year ago. Because people know that the inventory is outdated.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm pivoting. Did you actually end up finding it on the website or on the mobile app? I'm curious. And now we're keeping that conversation going. So do you think that there's a way to just add that quick chuckle or that quick, oh yeah, I bet if you found it on Zillow, because people always say, oh, my relative's a realtor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I already have a realtor. Oh, you already have a realtor. I totally get it. Who isn't a realtor these days? Half my block's got a license. Anyway, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like easier for me to address a tough question if I just try to get them to chill out a little bit through maybe a quick joke.
Oh, for sure. I mean, so humor is a great way to diffuse tension and to also get people more willing to accept new ideas, because with laughter, you're disarming them. So when someone's presented with a new idea, especially if it's in kind of opposition of what they're thinking before, there's an immediate defense mechanism to say, wait, no, let me prove how I'm right and how you're wrong. You get laughter as part of it. In that process of them laughing, they're more open to new ideas. And there are studies that prove this in terms of using humor in this way. And so I think you're exactly right. If they're like, no, I just want to call to know if it's available or not, as soon as you provide a laugh to them, you're providing them additional value. And yeah, you can kind of make a joke of, if it's listed on Zillow, or it's like, anything on the internet, it's hard to believe. As Abraham Lincoln said, you can't trust what you read on the internet. Kind of a quick joke where they're like,
Sure.
oh, okay, yeah, I get it. And now they're going to be able to listen, because when you get people to laugh, you get them to listen. When you get them to listen, you can get them to take action or get them to learn. And they've now had a positive experience with you. So, and working with some sales groups at IBM, they're a big believer that people buy from the first person to provide them value. And that value can be in the form of an assessment or a free product, or it can be in the value of a laugh, right? In that phone call, you provided value to them by saying, hey, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to give you some additional information that you can't find on the website, and you're not going to hate yourself on this call while I do it. And so I think it can be incredibly effective in that way.
Sure. And then if you think about marketing, we talked a little bit about service and sales. I think marketing is the most natural place for an organization to try. And I actually saw something about a year ago. It was a lawn sign, and it was in Arizona, a company called Firefly Realty. And as you know, most lawn signs are the same: headshot, phone number, for sale, logo. And this lawn sign, it had like a quote. It looked like an Instagram post. And the only thing the lawn sign said was better than your mom's basement. Like, that's amazing. Like 100% of the people that drive by that tell someone about it. It kind of has that Jay Bear talk trigger effect that Jimmy mentioned a couple weeks back when we interviewed Jay. So when I see that, Drew, I know it worked because it worked on me. So I don't care if it worked on anybody else. I think they're better now. I'm telling people in a case study of one, they nailed it. But how do you define getting humor right? What should we track? What is the ROI supposed to look like if we do use humor?
Well, it depends on the intention. So exactly to that point, humor in marketing, the goal is probably impressions and engagement. And the fact that you then remember this sign out of the thousands of other signs that you've seen means that you are kind of repeating it. You're sharing with other people. And chances are there's other people who have seen it, and maybe they've taken a picture of it. Now it goes up on social media, and now it's kind of free advertising for it. So it depends on the intention. And so effective humor in the workplace for us starts with what we call our humor map. And humor map is three things. It's your medium, your audience, and your purpose, where your medium is understanding, okay, how are you going to execute your humor? Is it in a email? Is it in a phone call? Is it in a sign that's going to sit in someone's yard? Who is the audience, and what does that audience know? What does that audience need? And what does that audience expect? Because you still want to, like, humor doesn't replace the work. Humor is how you do the work. So you still need to deliver against what the audience needs in a way that they maybe don't quite expect.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final piece is, why are you using humor? Because I'm not I'm an engineer by background. I'm obsessed with efficiency. It's not about humor for the sake of humor. Like, hey, we should have fun. It's humor is effective for specific things. And so
Mm-hmm.
you might say, okay, in the case of marketing, you're probably using that humor as a way to, one, get people to pay attention, and two, remember the message longer. The fact that you paid attention and remember that message means that it was successful. You might
Yes.
use humor in a different context to say, oh, you know what? I had a stressful meeting with a client recently. I need to relieve some stress in the car while I'm going to my next appointment. And that's going to be a different type of humor that you would use.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I was worried where you're going with that in the car and trying to get laughing. I didn't know where you're headed with that. If there was
Yeah, you need to roll down your window and tell jokes to all the people.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So we're going to look at two videos right now, Drew.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is a real estate team in Colorado that tried to use humor and it backfired.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is a non-real estate company that used humor and it went viral for the right reasons. So what I want you to do, just because you're such an expert at this stuff, is I'd love to kind of get your first impressions. You have not seen these.
I have not seen these. No.
I just wanted to get your kind of expert first impression as to why do you think it didn't do so well versus maybe why did the other one do so well. So John, let's cue up the first one, which is the Fresh Prince parody. So this is a team in Denver. We actually can't play the audio because if we do, they'll shut down the live stream because it's a copyrighted song. But they're basically saying this is a story, right? How real estate goes down. We're riding around our town, right? You can see all the colors, the big phone, trying to really pay homage to the 90s. You know, they changed all the words, of course, to make it more about selling a home. And the feedback, at least in the media, was sort of like, the concept of this video, Drew, is that it's become so expensive to actually own a home in this area that you kind of need to be Fresh Prince to afford it. And
okay.
so there was a little bit of negative feedback about that, a little bit of negative feedback about, you know, a pretty fairly large group of white people here performing a rap song. But when you see that, as you watch that roll, Drew, what did they do wrong? Like, I don't feel like what they did there is necessarily, I don't think they were trying to be racist. I don't think they were trying to cause a lot of controversy, but that thing, people hated it. Their local community hated it. It got taken down. It got written up in the news. It probably sucked for them. What did they do wrong?
Yeah, I think that, you know, without hearing the lyrics, which can make it a little bit tough, and my guess is that's part of the content. But if you're saying what they're kind of like alluding to or poking fun of was the fact that it was too expensive in that area and that you would need to be someone who, you know, has that level of money to even live in that area. I think there's kind of two components that then come into play. One, it's a negative focus on it. It's like, hey, we're going to make fun of our industry in a spot where it's too expensive, but still come and hire us for that service that we're talking about. Seems like a disconnect in terms of what you're wanting the audience to do. And then I think the other thing is that connection of, okay, the story of Fresh Prince is a person who's living in an area that isn't particularly safe, and as a Black man, and then moving into Bel Air, where it's a culture shock about different, you know, raising different, you know, status incomes and all that kind of stuff. And so I think the source material versus what then it was used for seems a little bit off. It's not the same as, but it's closer to, oh, I'm going to use like a very serious movie about the Civil War to now, you know, to sell my pipes or to sell my whatever. And so it's realizing that where the source material came from, what the parody is going to be about, has a disconnect, and the people in it, especially in today's age. Yeah, you take a show that was instrumental in terms of putting minorities on TV and in an interesting way, and then suddenly you're showing an entire video that has no minorities whatsoever in it. There's going to be a disconnect there.
Okay.
And it's also, I think that, you know, people are already a little bit apprehensive about something like that because it's meant for selling a service. It's meant for like, and hey, now call us up and give us money.
Sure.
And so all of those things kind of combined together make for something that's not quite as effective.
Yeah, it's a lot about just self-awareness. You know, you got to be self-aware that a lot of people might already think our industry is greedy.
Exactly.
Right. And so you just really explained that well. I got nothing to add there, but I do have a question.
Hmm.
What should I do if I made that video and then it flopped? What should I do next after it flops?
I think this is where you want to show some humility and show some recognition to say, okay, hey, we've you might even speak to we've understood the value of humor. We try to make what we do a little bit more fun, but we
Mhm.
clearly missed the mark, and we missed the mark in kind of some of these ways, and respond directly to some of what the complaints were in reaction to it, and say, hey, that we're gonna work to do better, and here's kind of how we're working to do that. I think use it as a learning opportunity and be honest with people about how you're going to learn from that. I
Mhm.
think that, and we know this from Brene Brown's work, vulnerability is a very kind of key message right now to recognize it. You can be honest with people, be like, hey, we tried this. We're sorry that it didn't work. Here's how we understand. And if there is specific backlash in a community, say, here's how we're actually going to help that specific community with this. And so it becomes more of a feel good story so that people, when they think about it later, they can think about, oh, that video didn't work, but it led to these
Sure.
things that happened.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I actually read the write up and I read the owner's response, and I think he did a lot of what you did. He just said, "Hey, we missed the mark in several ways, but here's who we are, and here's what we really stand for, and here's our track record in this community."
Yeah.
And so I felt like he did a good job of first apologizing, and then secondly saying that's not who we are, and we can prove it. But yes, we screwed up, because a lot of times it's tempting to kind of stand your ground a bit, right? Because again,
Yeah.
it wasn't the most controversial video I've ever seen, but I'm sure it felt like it was to him while all the complaints were happening. So
Right.
now we're going to cut to a
Yeah,
different
and a
video.
real quick kind of comment on that
Yeah.
is that's where you can use a little bit of self-deprecating humor as well as that thing. Because so self-deprecating, there's four styles of humor.
Yeah.
Affiliative humor, it's positive, inclusive, like Ellen DeGeneres, kind of what we talked about earlier. There's
Hmm.
self-enhancing, which is a positive form of humor where you're enhancing kind of situations yourself. We'll probably talk about self-defeating is a negative form of humor where the target is yourself, and then aggressive humor is a negative form of humor where the target is someone else. And
Hmm.
humor in the workplace, aggressive humor doesn't really have much of a place with sarcasm and satire. It just doesn't lead to good results. Self-defeating humor can be very good when you're in a high status position or if you want to reduce status differential. So
Got
as
it.
the owner of this organization, he can use some self-defeating humor up
Hmm.
top in making that apology to say, hey, you know what, I'm kind of humbling myself a little bit before this group and recognizing that, this thing that we tried didn't work. And so that
Sure.
could be another way to kind of lead into that.
That makes sense. So let's get into the clip that did really well. This is a little different, and you are going to be able to hear this. And it's about a 3-minute video. We're just going to play about 30 or 40 seconds here for you, Drew.
Sure.
But this, to set this up, this is a company that sells office snacks,
Mhm.
not the sexiest
Yeah.
like business model. And I saw this video and I immediately sent it to my office manager. I immediately shared it. And we're not going to see the end of the video, but the call to action at the end was brilliant. At the end, you basically can order a free box. But I want you to watch this because I think this is one of the best uses of humor, but I'd love to know what you think they got right. Let's roll it, John.
Sure.
Great. Let's face it. Any snack that comes in a 5-pound tub is f***ing gross.
These are f***ing gross.
Don't say f***ing in the office. I'll clean it up. And I don't have hours to spend shopping for snacks online or schlepping to the grocery store to find something for all these special requests.
I'm going paleo, so
I don't do artificial, so.
I'm vegan, not vegetarian, but I eat fish.
But now there's a solution I do have time for, and it makes my life easier. Introducing Snack Nation, the
So there's more to that, Drew, than what we just showed, but you can kind of feel that lady's pain. She's managing this office. There's all these millennials that have all these requests. What do you think they did a good job of there in the short segment that you saw?
I think one of the big things, and maybe this is in juxtaposition what the previous group probably didn't do as well, is they know their audience, right? That is very much targeted towards like startup and tech companies. And that's not a commercial or ad that's really targeted towards your Fortune 100 companies. Most
Sure.
likely. Now, there might be some people that watch that and be on board with it, but it's very much this kind of the start in tech culture of one, that they're providing free snacks in the office. That kind of eliminates a certain kind of target that they're going after. Two, that they're cursing in the video is also a certain type of cultural thing that's happening. So I think they're very aware who their audience is. And from that, it seems like they clearly have done research. They can poke fun of not any individual in the workplace, but these kind of personas, the people who are kind of like just the line of I'm vegan, not vegetarian, but I do eat fish, right? That's a very specific, everyone's met someone who is very kind of staunchly in one way about their diet, and then they're okay because they like, I dated a vegetarian who also ate hot dogs. It was the weirdest thing to me. So we've all met people who have had that kind of thing. And so I think they did that well. I think the writing and the pacing worked well. And my guess, and this is maybe something that was missing from the other one, is humor is simple, but it's not easy. And you can ask the question of, okay, what makes something funny? And how do you know if something is funny? And the answer is, did it make someone laugh? And the difficult thing, the reason why even the top comedians, even, Seinfeld, who's made millions of dollars from this, or, Dave Chappelle or that kind of thing, they're always testing material because they never know exactly what's going to work. And so my guess is that they probably tested that with some comedians or with their kind of target audience. To say, okay, this actually matches. These are the pain points. And this is a great way to find humor, is if you reach out to some of your past clients or some of the incoming ones, find out what their pain points are. What are the difficult things in the realty like space, see what people kind of like complain about, and then start to write humor towards that. People are going to be like, oh, this person gets me. It reminds me of
show them that you know them, is what our friend Phil Jones says. Show me that you know me. And that's what that video did. And I think that is like, at least when I find myself crying uncontrollably, like I'll tell you, the last time I was crying laughing watching a comedy special was Ellen, her newest one. And she's got this bit where she talks about how, like, when we try on shoes, like we do stuff that we actually never do in the shoes. So like we just start jumping like, ooh, and we like look at them from angles we never look at them at. And we like walk fast to see if the heel slips. Like there's just this weird, funny thing that we do when we try on shoes. And I was just dying because it's so relatable, because my wife is going, you do that. And I'm like, I do that, and I make my kids do it. You pick their leg up and check the heel real quick. So I think when something is just so relatable because you've been there, that's when you get the best laughs. And so everybody works with somebody that's doing keto right now. We do. Rich, he's talking about it every morning. Everybody works with somebody that thinks GMOs and high fructose corn syrup are the enemy. So I just thought they did a great job. Now, here's one of my favorite parts about that video, Drew. This mug, they featured this mug in the video. Let me drop everything and work on your problem, because that's kind of what the ultimate office manager is thinking. So we're going to do something really cool right now. The first 10 people that buy Drew's book, his book is called Humor That Works. If you buy his book right now and you share it on Instagram and Facebook and you tag Curaytor, so say, hey, I just bought this book. It's called Humor That Works. Thanks for the recommendation, Curaytor. The first 10 people to buy the book, share it on social, and tag Curaytor are going to win this mug. We're going to give you this mug for free as a thank you for buying Drew's book. There's audio, digital, print, or actually digital or print, whichever copy you buy. So we gave these away on Instagram about a year ago and people loved them. And so the first 10 people to buy Drew's book right now, you're going to get this mug for free. Annette will find your post and she'll let you know that you won. Now,
that's amazing. I'll be right back. I'm going to buy my own book.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a great mug. And that's a great mug. It's a great thing where that's another thing that you can do in anything that you do is you can add small, subtle, kind of almost Easter eggs. I do this in my presentations. A lot of times you can do it kind of in your ads or in your conversations or in your contracts, small things that you're not hitting people over the head with, but that when they notice, it gives them a small reward. In fact, I was just reading about there's a whole hidden pricing strategy at certain stores, like at Best Buy. If it ends in a 9, then it's a normal price. If it ends in a 5, then it's on sale or whatever. And this article was talking about the reason why they do that, and they actually kind of advertise it. It's like In-N-Out secret menu. you start to feel like you're in part of the in crowd. You're in this inside joke. And that humor then builds an even stronger brand affinity or personal affinity because you're like, I'm part of this thing. And so I think that's a great kind of use of an additional level of humor where it's a small thing. You're not calling super amounts of attention to it. It's just, hey, this speaks to kind of, more of this is the type of people that we are.
Sure. And you teach this stuff to brands, organizations, you do workshops, you do clinics, whatever it may be. I was curious, when you leave a client and then go back and then you watch them execute, what is an example of a brand that you felt like really nailed your advice? I showed you a video that I thought was a great use of humor. Who are some people that you've spoken for or consulted with that kind of made you proud after you worked with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's been a few, because my focus is a little bit less. I haven't done a ton with, so I'm not going in and consulting brands. I'm not like an agency going in working with a brand and let's create, the Old Spice campaign or something like that. Although that is a fantastic, case study of humor within a certain area. So that's not the focus. Mine is more on how do individuals use that humor to get better results in their own work. So it's stuff that doesn't necessarily show up, say, on, a Super Bowl ad, but more is a email that they send out that gets effective results. So I have a person who in the sales world has gotten better results by using GIFs more in their responses, right? So they send out kind of a normal cold email in some extent. And then when they do a follow-up, they almost use a GIF reply. And this came because someone used this on me. Someone sent me, do you know the John Travolta meme where it's from Pulp Fiction and it's just John Travolta's character from Pulp Fiction just kind of looking around like this? Someone sent me a cold email. I didn't respond to it. A week later, sent me just that GIF. Like to say, looking around like, hey, where's your response? Right. And it got me to smile. Right. Yep. Because that's all it said. And so I responded to that person. I didn't need what they were selling, but I responded and saying, hey, thanks for the humor. People who I've worked with have started to use that in part of their sales process to say, hey, this is now how we can communicate. And
kind of like is this microphone on? Like, is my like phone cord cut off? Right. Like, cause you're not replying. And I do think that, listen, number one, when you're working with internet leads that are unresponsive, you don't have a whole lot to lose any damn way. Right. Because if they're not replying, why not try something different? Sometimes people try emotional versus logical. Well, maybe humor can get certain people off the fence to hit reply. I definitely love that concept. So you're saying the person emails you or you email someone.
Yep.
And then in theory, they don't respond, which happens all the time. Yep. And then you kind of come back and it's just like, do I stink? Like, why aren't you responding?
Right. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
And it's not going to work for all of them. But what a lot of the people that I've worked with have found is that it increases their response rate. Right. Sure. It's not going to magically make it 100%. Sometimes people are like, well, some people still didn't respond. Well, it's like, yeah, it's not going to work for every single person, but it is going to certainly help.
Yeah, and if people don't know, go to Giphy, guys. Giphy, Giphy.com. One of the best places to find quality GIFs for this type of a purpose. But I think
that's an example where you don't have to be the creator of humor, right? You don't have to go out and reshoot that scene. You're leveraging something that already exists. And I think that's one great way to do it. Another case study is one of the FBI agents that did some work with the FBI specifically around building rapport, because they were looking at how do we build better relationships with people when there is this, even for me, when I was working with the FBI, it's the first room that I've ever presented to where like 90% of the room was armed. Like it can be an intimidating thing. And so they're working on using humor as a way to build better rapport with people to reduce some of those status differentials. So one of the agents in particular has gotten very good at using humor up top as a way to build stronger relationships with people. So they see him as a human in addition to being an FBI agent. Not that he's just this high status thing, but it's like, oh, this is a person that we can laugh with, that we can joke with, that I have an actual relationship with.
Yeah, I wrote a book called People Work. That was my first book. And there's a chapter called Human Companies Win. And the more like humans are things like funny and caring and kind, and then businesses are things like spreadsheets and accounting and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And people, like, no matter what you sell, just a person and a person.
Mm-hmm.
So don't forget that for sure. It's funny. I'll give you a quick story. That was funny. About 90% of the crowd was armed. So I actually was able to use humor to diffuse a situation with a cop one time, where my friend and I had gotten in a little bit of trouble in college. And we were, talking to the sheriff's officer, and he had to go back to his car to grab something. I don't know, go run our licenses or something. You know how they do. And he said, "Now you boys stay right here." I said, "Sir, we're not the kind that run. We're slow. Even if we ran, you would catch us." And he laughed, and he thought it was funny. And long story short, like, I kind of got away that day, just to be clear. So I don't know if that did it, but that was just me trying to diffuse that situation. Say, hey, even if I run, you're going to catch me. I'm crazy slow. My nickname is Slow-Mo. That was my nickname in high school. So I was just trying to use it because I was scared. And, a lot of times we get scared, fight or flight. I tried funny. It worked.
Yeah. And if you think about it, like, because we do a lot of work, like with the FBI or with the Red Cross and other groups that do very serious work. And even if your work is serious, you have to recognize that it's humans doing the work, right?
Sure.
Like you said, it's humans going into the workplace. And, my guess is that many of your listeners or many of the people watching are likable people at home. Right. And then some people go into the workplace and something changes. They feel like they have to put on a work face. They have to feel like they have to like remove all emotion. And like at home, they laugh with their friends. They make jokes. They smile. It's
kind of like how you don't cuss around your parents.
Right.
But you don't really try not to. You just know not to. And I think
it's just
some people just been conditioned, maybe generational, may not. But I do think some people have been conditioned that you're right. When you step through that door, there's no jokes in business. Like, so I can see how it'd be hard. That was actually one of my last two questions here, Drew, is if I'm a brand that has been serious for decades, like Remax is a good example. Coldwell Banker is a good example in our industry. Those are very serious brands. Yeah. They don't come across as, funny, and they've been serious for a long time, and that works for them. So like, if you are one of these brands, or even let's just say you're a real estate agent and you've been in the market for 20 years and your brand is not funny, well, wouldn't it kind of be off brand to try?
No, well, I don't think so, because, to use humor, it's not about, everything has to change and suddenly you got to use Comic Sans and all of your like promotional materials, and you got to have like clown noses on when you show up and all, like, that's not what we're talking about. Like, I think that, part of it is going back to kind of that human level. Part of it is starting small, because humor is more broad than comedy. Certainly comedy is a part of humor, but it's very intentional that the book is humor that works and not comedy that works, because humor is more broad. It also includes things that are maybe just a little bit silly or just a little bit different, where the goal isn't to make something funny, it's to make things a little bit more fun. And so if you're an agent that works for a more serious kind of type place, or, even if you have been 20 years in the business, that doesn't mean that you can't use a little bit of humor when you're first meeting someone for the first time and building a relationship with them. Doesn't mean that you can't use humor, like I said, as a way to relieve your own stress going from one meeting to another. If you had a very difficult person that you're working with, and you don't relieve that stress before your next appointment, that's going to carry over. So listening to your podcast, listening to a comedy podcast, listening to some comedy on Spotify can help you laugh, relieve some of that stress, so that you show up more present for that next group, or so that you show up present for your family when you get home.
Yeah, that's perfect. Look, I have some tweets of yours, Drew. We're going to pull up a couple tweets that you did recently, and I want to ask you about one of them in particular. But you are a very funny guy on Twitter. If you guys are not following Drew, make sure you go follow him on Twitter at Drew Tarvin. That's also his same handle on Instagram. He's much funnier on Twitter, right? True. It's just the written form is just easier to crank out. So I really have two questions. Like, like half of these jokes I don't even get. To be honest, like, I'm so pale that the only time I get tan is when doing trigonometry. I'm sure TAN is a button on a calculator or something. Like, I get it.
In fact, it is. It's how you calculate tangent. But I appreciate that you pulled that one out to say, okay, I trust him that he's funny enough that this is maybe an actually good joke. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, like I love the joke on the top left about maybe genies live in more things, but now I'm not allowed to go back to the Brooklyn Museum because I was rubbing everything. So I love that you're practicing what you preach, basically. Does this stuff just come to you and you just tweet it when you think of it, or do you write stuff down and tweet it later?
Yeah, so there's two things that happen. Those come from one, and this is a great tip for anyone that wants to start to use humor more, is to keep a humor notebook. Almost every comedian worth their salt in terms of, and even different across different ways, has a humor notebook. So anytime you're going through the world, or anytime something crazy happens to you, anything that makes you go, huh, that's interesting, write it down in this notebook. If something crazy happens with a potential client, or another agent does this other thing that's like kind of ridiculous, some of these stories that we're talking about, or people have kind of shared what these are all the things that have annoyed me lately about this process. Write all those things down, because then when you want to be funny, you can go back. Because it can be very difficult to sit down and be like, okay, be funny and go. That's hard. But if you have a humor notebook, then you can go back and be like, okay, I do want to work on things now. How do I, what have I observed in the past and how can I use that? And then the second thing is I'm intentional, where it's like each day I try to spend a little bit of time and think about, okay, what's my tweet going to be for the day? What am I, by creating some type of consistent process. So social media is a great way to test out material. So I post tweets and I know, and I see which ones get good reactions, and that later leads into my speaking engagements or some of the stand-up that I do. It's a stage to share. And that practice is really important. So create some type of consistent way for you to do this. So I'll sit down and be like, okay, now for my humor notebook, which of these ideas spurs something? Or if I don't have anything, then I'll start to, I like to do crossword puzzles. So I'll look at crossword puzzles, look at random words and be like, okay, what does this word make me think of? Can I think of any jokes around it? So it is a very much an intentional thing. It's not like it magically came to me and now here you go. There's work to them.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do the same thing with Twitter, not for comedy, but we know that if we tweet something that resonates and gets above average likes on Twitter, I can close my eyes, put it on Instagram, and guarantee that it does good. So it's a similar concept. If you test it on Twitter, it's probably going to do good on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just absolutely true. Good stuff. Bring the tweets back up, John. There was one tweet there that I wanted you to explain, Drew. It looks like you were at a conference last year. The bottom right one. You said you were tweeting someone else, but it says humor helps us acknowledge that we can have mixed emotions about situations in life. Why did you tweet that? What did you mean?
So, that was at a conference and someone else was talking about humor. And I think people sometimes feel like something happens and you can almost only have one emotion towards it, right? If, like, say, for example, a friend of yours tells you that, they didn't get a job, but then later you find out that you did, or a client or something like that, you can have mixed emotions about that. You can feel empathy for your friend who didn't get that success, but then also still feel happy for yourself because you did, or because someone else did.
Sure.
And recognizing that emotions are muddy. There's going to be times where you're both happy and angry, or that you're sad but kind of relieved. And so that was just kind of a tweet that like helped me, or that was a quote that kind of helped me remind that. And humor can sometimes call attention to that. Humor can help us reconcile that we have these mixed emotions about this thing that has happened.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's ever, lost a loved one and been in that environment knows that it is very sad. It is very inspiring and positive too.
Exactly.
Yeah. So as much as you want to be just sad, you can't help but be so grateful that you knew them, and you can't help but to think about a lot of the positive stuff too. Well, cool. Thanks for explaining that. People get nervous when we bring their tweets up. It's one of our favorite segments on the show.
No, it's a nice surprise, especially getting to relive some of those puns. Is it bad to enjoy your own humor? I don't know. Maybe it is.
I laugh at all my own jokes, man. I like my own humor, and that's all that I really care about. So here's the last question. where can people go to buy the book if they haven't yet? Give me 30 seconds on what will they learn in the book if they don't have it yet. I'd love everybody to buy it. You can see it over his shoulder. It's called Humor That Works. You get a free mug if you buy it and you're in the first 10. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book and why people should buy it, Drew.
Sure. The book is everything that I've learned over the last 10 years of helping people and organizations get better results using humor in the workplace. So it's really kind of the what, why, and how of using humor with the intent to get better results and have more fun, right? That's why it's called the missing skill for success and happiness. It's around how do we enjoy the 90,000 hours that we're going to spend at work. So the average person will work 90,000 hours in their lifetime. So it's to say, how do we enjoy that time more? And oh, by the way, when we enjoy it, we will get better results doing it. So it'll be the focus is 10 humor strategies across the 5 core skills of humor in the workplace. There are plenty more puns in the book as well, additional stories about my grandmother. So if you've seen the TEDx talk, you kind of know how great my grandmother is. There's a lot of humor throughout, but it very much is a business book on the skill of humor.
Did you consider calling it Humor at Work? And why didn't you call that if you did consider it?
Because humor at work is kind of the phrase of what we do. Humor that works is the intent that, because part of it is also, and this is true of like, say, startup cultures, is it's not just, hey, a ping pong table doesn't mean that you have humor. It might say, oh, that's humor at work, but is it effective? And so the key for me is I'm an engineer before I am a comedian or a humorist. Yeah. And that the key is that it is actually effective, that it gets results.
Yeah, it solves a problem or leads to an outcome. And that's what I love. I love that you're combining, many worlds that are different. Comedy and engineers are never in the same sentence except for you. That's why you're the only one. Cool. Well, guys, buy the book. Drew, thank you so much. If people want to follow you, they can go to @Drew Tarvin, DREWTARVIN. The Water Cooler airs every week live at 1 p.m. on Wednesdays. You can catch the replay on iTunes and Spotify. Next week, I'm heading to Seattle, and I'm going to be doing a pitch battle. 14 startups, 14, are going to be competing for $15,000 and a bunch of other prizes. And next week, you guys are going to get to watch that live. I have gotten NAR to agree to live stream the pitch battle from Seattle. So that will be next week's special edition of the Water Cooler. Drew, thank you for being on, man. Keep fighting the good fight. If you laugh and you're living, that's the way I think about it. Even the toughest days have bright, dark days, dark nights, brighter days. If you can't laugh at yourself, if you can't laugh at your circumstances, no one else is gonna. So humor that works. Drew Tarvin, good stuff. Water Cooler. Thanks, guys.